The Stage Door Show, celebrating the independent artist. With your host, Dave Hondell.
Reach out with both your arms, and the gesture stops and finishes. We spent the night years at a time. You almost convinced me that you're innocent.
Hi everybody, welcome to the Stage Door Show tonight. This is Dave Hondell. I'm very excited to have my guest tonight. We have the Frontman from the amazing synth pop band based out of Los Angeles called the Sometimes Island. Please welcome to the show, Matt Blankenship Jr. Matt, thank you for coming on the show tonight.
It's fantastic to be here, Dave.
First of all, I want you to kind of tell our listeners, you have an interesting name for the band, so where did the name, the Sometimes Island, come from?
You know, I grew up in Texas, and Lake Travis has an island that is sometimes there and sometimes not, depending on the lake level. And, if there's a drought, the level will go down, and there's this kind of like landmass poking out, and you can park your boat there and hang out on it. And then there's other times where it's just gone. And I named it that just kind of on a whim, and it came to reflect the fact that I've been a one-man band. I've had a bunch of different lineups, and ultimately it's just kind of stuck and ended up being something kind of memorable. So just kind of went with it.
You know, and talking about being a one-man band, I mean, the band really kind of formed last year, if I'm not mistaken. Talk about the formation of your band and really kind of being a one-man show before that.
It had a couple different lineups before it, but it was more of like on a show-by-show basis. And then we managed to put together this lineup probably about a year ago. But until then, being a one-man band was pretty crazy. I got a Honda Fit, and it was just like you can load in a bunch of gear in there and just driving all around the West Coast and the country, doing shows at just random dive bars just by myself. And it was definitely like a growth experience. There's a lot of like using tracks and stuff, but it's just you out there, so you got to carry the whole thing. So I feel like it really sharpened my teeth, and I'm really grateful for that experience.
I really love your sound, Matt. The new single, Phantom Limb, has an incredible vibe, and the video is a lot of fun. I actually got, when I was researching, I can't stop watching your video. It's really awesome. And talk about that single and really the making of that video, because it was really unique.
Yeah, so the song itself was something I had written for another artist, and they were like, "This sounds too emo," and I was like, "Okay." And so I took it, and I produced it in this kind of like electro-pop, synth-pop kind of way that it is now.
The silence never tells me where to stop. I can tell you where it is. My phantom limb sprawled out, I'm in a bag. With an outline where I used to be. And this gentleman will take you back and make sure you have a place to sleep. Holding on up till I pass out, carrying on like I don't exist. 'Cause your picture's not on the wall, 'cause that's where the writing is.
And I took it to the director of the video, Michael Corsi, and he had this crazy idea about like my limbs detaching from my body and like my right arm fighting the rest of my body for the microphone. And so we decided to get choreographer Amanda McLeod, and we hired 4 dancers and put them in morph suits, which are like that little green man kind of thing that you see hanging out of like penalty boxes and hockey games and stuff. And just had black ones against a black background, and just did this kind of goofy little video that I'm just extremely happy with, and I'm really happy that it's finally out and the world can see it.
Now, you're known for your incredible live shows, and I know obviously in the last year has been really tough, last several months, with COVID out there, and so you're not able to really do, the same kind of shows as you're used to. So how has that been the past several months, being really, a great live, act, and having to really kind of stay back a little bit from the live shows? So what have you been doing during that time? Have you been doing some writing?
Yeah, we have an EP coming up. It's called the Pilot EP, and the first single will be dropping on November 20th. I've been doing just a bunch of writing, and obviously just it really sucks not being able to play live shows. We had a show coming up at the Troubadour, the famous Troubadour in Los Angeles, and that was supposed to be on April 4th. And so that got canceled, and we had the privilege of playing at the Satellite in Silver Lake back in January, right before that shut down forever, and I think it's going to be a restaurant or something now. So I'm just, it's also like looking for ways to support the venues that are struggling and the Save Our Stages movement. So, yeah, it's been rough, but, it's intense pressure forms diamonds. So I've been trying to just like write as much as I can and expand the ways that we can get our music out there into the world.
Well, talk about, you just mentioned a foundation. Can you mention that again and how people can find out about it and donate?
Yeah, so the Save Our Stages Foundation, I'd say just Google it and look it up, but it's basically gathering funding and lobbying the government to put in some stimulus for live venues, like the mid-level venues that are, and just anywhere with a stage that is a bar that is struggling right now because their income is completely cut off because, the giants of the world that own, like the large, I don't want to mention names, but like the big guys are going to be fine and the little guys are all going to be screwed or bought up by the big guys. So this is a really, really important thing for indie bands and anyone who wants to come up and make their own way in the world, because I think it's really, really important. A lot of my favorite artists are people that I've just kind of wandered into somewhere, seen them play, and then gotten to go have a drink with them afterwards. And then they've ended up being some of my favorite people and some of my favorite music to listen to. So it'd just be a shame to lose that or have to start that over from the ground up.
Oh man, that is so important that you mentioned that. Yeah, because our show is nothing but independent artists and people who love independent music and independent arts. And one of the things that we really push for is those foundations like that. And so I'm glad you mentioned that. So everybody, make sure you Google that and donate like crazy. Use some of that stimulus money that you got for the past several months and give to a great cause like that, because it is really important. And you mentioned a lot of the, you mentioned some of the, playing some of these iconic venues in LA, but like the Viper Room and some of the really iconic places that you've played, and really talk about the market in LA for indie arts, because I know that indie music is big in LA. And how does that maybe differ from like some of the other like major markets, like maybe Nashville or New York, some of the Atlanta, maybe Texas as well. So talk about the indie arts in Los Angeles and how it is for you being an indie artist there.
So I found that LA is it's a really, really great place to be an up-and-coming artist, and I feel like it will continue to be if we have these outlets for live music, because it's not the cheapest place to live, but the way that the venues are and the way that the system is set up, I feel like Nashville it's tough. It's very, very crowded. New York is extremely crowded, and LA, there's kind of room for up-and-coming artists to make their way onto a bigger stage just by being good and not by just knowing people and pulling strings and stuff like that. So, I just hope that these venues are still around. I feel like a lot of the ones on the Sunset Strip have kind of fallen into this pay-to-play kind of thing that personally I think is reprehensible. But, there's independent bookers that are still out there, and I hope that they survive, and that's how we got the Troubadour show. And the Troubadour is like a lot of people will remember that from watching the Elton John biopic where he starts like levitating, playing the piano. That's at the Troubadour, and that's where Led Zeppelin was played and Bob Dylan, and it's a great place to be able to make a mistake and be able to learn from your mistake and not be screwed over because there's no back from it. Like everybody's heard about it, like might happen in Nashville, or there's just can't afford the rent anymore, like it might be in New York. And it's always expensive, but I think that it's a good nest for up and coming artists, and a big part of that is that indie venue scene. And so I'm just doing everything I can to make sure that we save that.
And I know in New York, where I live in New York, and some of the venues down in the Village where Bob Dylan played there as well, and Janis Joplin, and I mean, way back in the 60s and even before that, and they're still around, they're still in the Village, and they still pack in the place, obviously during normal times, but and it just the fact to walk in through the doors, I couldn't even imagine being on the stage where some of these legends played. So do you think about that when you play in these famous venues? I mean, when you're up on stage, that the people who came before you.
I mean, of course. The first big show I ever had was with my college band. We were called P.S. Nevermind, and we played at the Whiskey A Go Go. And I was just thinking about how, Jim Morrison being up there, singing the end and freaking everybody out with the bridge, and you can kind of feel that presence. You can feel it in the way that the stage kind of wobbles a little bit when you push your weight into it, because it's been up there for so long, and you can't help but think about all of the feet that have done that same thing before you. And so I just hope that's going to be around for future generations after we get out of this whole pandemic craziness.
Yeah, and I want to get into something that I read in your bio as well. It talks about your song philosophy, and I just want to read the first sentence here and ask you about that, or first couple sentences. But it reads, addictions to people are more invisible than those to substances. There's no paper trail, no paraphernalia, no ashtrays, no residue, no rehab, no financial ruin. I mean, where do these words come from as far as, your philosophy? Do you, I mean, obviously take these and incorporate them into your music?
Yeah. I feel like there's a lot of life that you have to be able to live to be able to write songs. And I've gone through a lot of stuff with a lot of friends and girlfriends. And man, it's, if you don't take a second to analyze what it is that you're doing with your life and process that, internalize it, and turn it into art, then it's just going to sit there and fester. And I'm going through a situation like that right now with one of my friends that I won't mention, but, I was trying to, I smacked my hand so hard on this blunt oven earlier today that it drew blood while I was rushing back there trying to slow scramble some eggs, got to constantly stir them around. The whole situation just kind of made me laugh. My hand's okay, but, there's people in your life, and you have to process what's happening to you. And I find that if I didn't have songwriting, I'd have lost my mind a long time ago.
Yeah, I mean, music is important, I think, to everybody in some respects. But, to be a creative person, and, like I was telling you before we started the show, I'm not a musician, but I've been around, the arts my whole life. And whether it's through acting or music or writing or, filming, anything like that, I mean, I think it's a great outlet to get things off your chest, I guess, in a way. But I think it's important, and I think arts, to be around, and it kind of brings me to my next point. I talked to a fellow LA band, Justin Emmerd, with Love in a 38, and we had a great interview, and we talked about the fact that the arts in schools and the arts in just communities in general, with people who may not be able to either afford it, or maybe, they have a disability of some kind, and the arts really help them get through really tough times. And, when I look at different art programs, and it seems to be that art programs are usually, their budgets are usually cut before any other, programs in schools. And I think that, kids growing up to get into the arts in school, I think it keeps them, I guess, engaged in something positive. And, what are your thoughts on that, as far as, like we were talking about earlier, the stages, keep the stages around, and, get government funding for that type of thing. But what are your thoughts on arts in general, and the place for it, and, in schools and, communities where, kids can grow up knowing something like, music, as opposed to being on the streets?
Oh, absolutely, man. And first off, I got to shout out people like you who aren't musicians but are in here, supporting the arts, having me on your podcast. And I also want to shout out Claudia Cadelco, Capo Corleone, my manager, and Ian Logue from C2 Management. And if it weren't for people like you, I wouldn't be where I'm at. And if it weren't for the music teachers of the world, Dr. Kazanoff, I could sing Stevens. The reason I'm playing music we had in my high school like a soundproof room at the back of this fine arts building, and we had this little break after lunch back when I was in middle school, and we used to like race each other down there to see who could like sit at the drum set first or like grab the the guitar amp or the bass amp, and we just like play down there, and like some girls would come down and listen to us, and we're like, ooh, and that's like being a seventh grader going through all that, and then starting a band, and then going on and taking music theory classes in high school. Like, I never took another music theory class after high school, and if it weren't for that experience there, I wouldn't have seen what's possible. And you have to see what's possible in order to like go for it. And if you don't see what's possible, you're just gonna drift into hopelessness. And I think that music saves people more than we say out loud, and that is a real thing. I mean, that sounds aspirational to some, like, oh, music programs will keep people off the streets. I think that's absolutely true. I think whether or not they end up being musicians, they'll see that they can do something that's bigger than themselves, and they can create something that they hear in their heads and put it down and like have it come out in the real world. And so, yes, I hope that makes more musicians out of kids. I hope that it makes more entrepreneurs out of kids. I hope it makes just people believe in themselves more. So I think that funding music is super, super important. The way that our school system is run it's just, super antiquated, and you can see that when you look at any textbook that kids are having to buy and how dated they usually are. It's a shame. And I hope that things change, and that comes with like voting, and that comes with by advocating for what you see as being important. And so I hope that everybody listening goes out and just does something, because that's all it takes is for everyone to do something, because one person can't do everything. And any advocate I've ever talked to will be like, don't try to do it all. You'll get burnt out. You'll stop entirely. And so, it's up to you listening right now. That's what I got to say about that.
Yeah, I mean, that's so well said. And, getting out there and lobby for things like this. And I think it's important that everybody, especially, our audience is mostly independent artists. And, like you said, those people listening out there, it does only take, a little bit of effort if everybody does something. So that, like I said, well said on that. I also want to talk to you about talking about independent music and being an independent artist. You actually created your entire 2017 Bad People EP in your home studio. And we talk a lot about this on our show, about home studios, and things have really kind of shifted away from either big time recording studios where it costs thousands of dollars to get a session, and people can do things at their home that really has the same studio quality as if you were in a major studio. And so talk about that, creating things in your own home studio, and also be able to put things out on streaming platforms that's available now to basically anybody. And how does that make it easy for the artist out there? Again, like everybody has that same option to them. So I guess competitive wise, it creates more competition, but at the same time, it gives the independent artist that maybe doesn't have the major backing, to do something special and get their music out to the world.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I think there's definitely room for big studios and home studios. I don't think that, studios are going to go extinct like I've heard a lot of people predict. And I would equate it to, every major director out there started on like an iPhone or like a camcorder, like depending on how old they are. Like there's access to everything now. And man, you can get bogged down in it. It can take you a long time getting one song out because of all these different plugins you can download and samples and watching YouTube videos on how to do this and how to don't do that. But the important thing is to like create it and to use this access, this unprecedented access that you have to get your music out there into the world. There's, digital distributors. I use DistroKid. You can get your music on Spotify, Apple Music, Deezer in France, that's big over there. Like, you can get it wherever you need it to go. And the trick is just to, like, not doubt yourself so much and to go create it and then to listen to it and just make sure that, you're proud of it. And you might never be proud of it. I'm very hard on myself. It takes a long time to, like, get to where you want to be. But as long as you're putting things out there and getting that feedback, you're going to get there. And, you know, with home studios, you can get a lot without spending a ton of money, or you can spend a ton of money. I've found my way that I like to do it now is to record and produce everything in my home studio except for usually a live drum set, which is just, it takes a professional to really mic it and do it well, and sometimes to record vocals with a studio just because of the, you know, $18,000 Telefunken microphones they might have at their disposal that you probably won't have at yours. And yeah, man, like the important thing is just to create and get it out there. And don't worry about, you don't have to spend that much money, but if you have a little extra, just be smart about what you do. Because I feel like I'm getting into something else right now, but there's a whole industry cropping up of like conferences and people who are going to, you pay us $600 and we'll playlist you on this and that. And I think that's, I don't know if I can curse on here, but that's all BS. And you don't need that. You can be smart with your money and create and just put it out there and find your audience, and they will appreciate you.
Yeah, absolutely. And no, that's well said as well. I want to talk about some of your singles. You know, let's talk about, there's a single called Succulent. Talk about that one, and where did that come about?
Oh, man. I think that might be my favorite song, either to play or that I've written, or maybe both. It's a song about a succulent, but it's really about a dog that I adopted 5 years ago. And I've written about this dog a couple times, and it's just about how nurturing things teaches you that, you know, we're really like all the same.
You came from the ground before we took you home. You were small, you were thirsty by the side of the road. Succulent, you poor thing, oh succulent, little guy, succulent. You poor thing, oh succulent. Water flows, drink up what you want till you feel alright. There's a place, it's warm and it's inside. You belong, succulent.
In that you can't really step over anybody and not notice them without making them feel like they don't belong and they're not a part of the same world. And so you got to really just, you know, be loving. And yeah, the message is just very like, just love everybody. That's the most important thing you should do. I don't care if that sounds sappy, but that's what that song's about.
No, that's good. You know, I like that. Everything we talk about here and everything you've been saying has really been a positive vibe. And that's one of the things I noticed, you know, listening to some of your songs and reading your bios. You're a very positive person, and I love to see that. And that's something like, you know, I really like to push on our show as well, just the positivity and you know, just like, you know, good vibes. So I appreciate that. With that being said, let's talk about Bad People. So, let's talk about that single.
As to what you just said, like, there's enough success for everybody. And if you find yourself being like, oh, I can't believe like blah 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 got this showcase and I didn't, or like I can't believe this song is popular, like what the hell, like that's just like, just get rid of that, just throw that away. There's no point in thinking that, because there's enough room for you and for everybody else. And then Bad People, yeah, Bad People is about how there aren't really good or bad people. There's just people who do things, and you know, there's always a positive and a negative side to everybody. And that song, it's meant a couple different things to different people. And so I don't really want to like define my songs personally. I think that's kind of the power of art, is like what it means to you. But I wrote that song very autobiographically about a time in my life where I just didn't like myself and what I was doing. And I was doing a bunch of stuff that I don't do now. And, you know, it's like, look at us. We're proving you right. We're bad people. We're exactly what you thought.
something up. Oh, it's bad people. If nothing works out, oh, it's probably us to blame. We're a disease on corners everywhere. Well, Mom, it's not your fault. Cautionary tale. We're bad people. We're good. If doing it's wrong, we're bad people. And if doing it's right, then we're not doing that again. And if doing it's wrong, we're bad people. And if doing it's right, no, we're not doing that again. We're getting here late. We're bad people. Comparisons are fair, and we're making you look good. We never had a chance. Oh, slam and shut the door. Oh, endless repeats of whatever came before.
And that's the root of, I think that's the root of all evil, is not having enough time to look at people specifically, to be like, oh, people like this are all the same, people like that are all the same. And it's a shortcut in thinking, and it's very human, and it's nothing that is escapable for any individual. It's just something that you need to process and be aware of your tendency for, and be able to recognize it as it happens. And so that song was kind of born out of this kind of dark period of my life that grew into this big philosophical thing. And so so I named that EP after it.
No, everything you said makes sense, and I think it's happening in the world today. Exactly what you're saying. I think people are prejudged too much, and working in New York City myself, taking the train, I bet you I'm with 5+ different nationalities on the train every single day, and everybody's in unison doing the same thing, and everybody's happy, maybe not happy to go to work, but everybody's just happy doing their own thing, either sitting on their phones or iPads or whatever. And to hear just what's going on with the hate in the world, I just wish somebody could take my train ride for a week. And I think they would be a changed person if they were able to see people in a different light. So I think what you said just made a lot of sense.
Oh, absolutely, man. If you disagree with someone, at least hear them out. Give them the dignity of having their opinion, even if it's wrong or if it's hateful or whatever, because they're human too, and they'll be able to figure it out. And it's about giving them that space. And the moment you start cutting them off and telling them that you're right and they're wrong, that's when they're going to dig in their heels. And I think that's why we're at where we're at as a country and as a global society in a lot of ways.
Yeah, well said. Matt, when did you get started in getting interested in being a performer? Because I know, some people have influences, I guess, growing up, or some of the music that they listen to. Was that your case? Did you hear music when you were growing up and you say, I want to do that? How did that come around to being you being a performer?
So I wanted to be a drummer. I'm not entirely sure. I remember why. I think it probably had to be, I wanted to be cool, and I thought being a drummer was cool, or I was drawn to playing rhythms and stuff. And my dad was pretty smart, so he got a practice snare for me. It was this flat little pad that didn't make a lot of noise, and told me that as soon as I could do a drum roll, then he would look at getting me a drum set. And I never really could, because I was young and I didn't understand that you have to let the stick bounce. And so he was like, I'll get you piano lessons. We have this piano over here. And so I was like, all right, fine. And so I just started playing piano. And after my brother got a guitar and started playing that, I was like, what the hell? He can't play guitar and me not play guitar. So I started playing his guitar a bunch. And then he ended up being a drummer. I guess my dad just gave up at that point, because we were just my dad has always been very into music, and that's been a huge influence, just the music he would play in the car when we were driving to school and stuff like that. And I think it all culminated when we went to the Austin School of Music. I'm from Austin, Texas, the Austin School of Music rock camp. And I went up there and I was singing a song, and I think at the end of the song I mic dropped and was the teachers got really mad at me. So like, don't damage our equipment. But just that rush, I was hooked. Like I was like, I think I was 14 at the time. I was like, this is what I'm going to do with my life.
Well, I think you made a good decision. Definitely a good decision. Talk to our audience of indie artists and really tell us from your experience being in a performer and recording artist, from your experience, what kind of advice would you give to somebody just, getting into being an indie artist at this point? What can you tell them?
Wow. If they're just getting into being an artist, like just starting to play music, I mean, just do it, and just do it over and over, and put out your music, and know that there's always going to be people who are going to like put you down. There's always going to be people who are going to be usually born out of jealousy, and you have to just create and put yourself out there. And I feel like when you're young and when you're starting out, that's going to take the shape of imitating the artists that you respect and that you listen to. And so do that, but just be able to realize that you don't sound like them when you're doing that. You sound like you, and to embrace that. And that's like the hardest step. That usually comes a little later in the game. I think I was just reading, I'm not a huge fan of Ben Folds' music, but I was just reading his autobiography, and I'm a big fan of that book, and he talks about this in there, about finding your voice and realizing that your voice is what it is and it is what it isn't. And that's beautiful. And there's someone out there who's going to love what you're creating, and so just don't get discouraged. If you're doing it with heart and with passion, like, there's an audience for you out there. And everybody gives up when it's darkest, and it's darkest right before the dawn. It sounds so cliche, but it's so true.
Yeah. No, I love that. Thank you for that. It's a lot of people, really take the advice that our artists give. So I appreciate that, Matt. And before we go, I want to see what's coming up next for you. What can our listeners look forward to hearing?
Well, you can look forward to hearing the pilot EP, and that's coming out single by single starting on November 20th. The first single is called Fighting For, and I'm really, really excited to share this music with y'all, because we've only had maybe 2 or 3 shows to play these songs at before everything shut down. And so they've just been kind of like living in a studio waiting to get out. And if I may be so bold, they're pretty good. So in the meantime, check out the Phantom Limb music video. It's on YouTube. And listen to Succulent on Spotify or Apple Music or whatever streaming service you use, or buy it on Bandcamp if you're so inclined.
Yeah, and I can't wait to until you guys go live again, doing some more live shows, because it's definitely watching your videos on YouTube. You can really see the energy that you guys have, and definitely can't wait to see that. So keep rocking out there, Matt. And I can't thank you enough for being on my show. Thank you for taking the time tonight, and best of luck to you in the future. And anytime you want to come back on the show, you're welcome anytime.
Sounds good, Dave. It was great meeting you, man. You have a good one.
You stole my